The SEAL leader's voice cut through the desert night, raw and desperate. "Anyone here know how to fly?" Silence. The storm of gunfire outside rattled the hangar walls, tracer rounds slicing through the dark sky. Every man in the room stared at the floor, knowing the truth. Without a pilot, the single A-10 sitting on the strip was just metal and paint. And then, at the back, a woman pushed her chair back. Slowly, deliberately, she stood. You're watching the storyscape, where impossible orders collide with unforgettable courage. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? The desert air was thick with dust and smoke, the night sky glowing faintly red from burning fuel depots beyond the perimeter. The forward base had been hammered for hours. Mortars rained down, armored convoys pushed closer, and the SEAL detachment inside the hangar knew they were minutes from being overrun. The leader slammed his fist against the steel table, eyes sweeping the exhausted men. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of reality. "Anyone here know how to fly?" The words echoed against the corrugated walls. Boots shifted uneasily, faces turned away. The SEALs were trained for everything: close combat, demolition, survival, but not this. Out on the tarmac sat an A-10 Warthog, scarred but intact, its shark-mouth nose art grinning in the flicker of distant flames. It was the only aircraft left, and without a pilot, it was nothing but dead weight. For a moment, the only sound was the rattle of gunfire outside and the moan of desert wind through broken panels. The captain's eyes hardened. He was ready to repeat the question when a chair scraped against concrete. Every head turned. At the far end of the hangar, a woman in grease-stained fatigues rose. She wasn't one of them. She was part of the maintenance crew, or so they thought. Her blonde hair was tied back, her face streaked with dust, but her posture, calm, deliberate, pulled the air out of the room. The SEALs stared in disbelief. Some scoffed under their breath. One muttered, "This isn't the time for jokes." She ignored them, her eyes fixed on the leader, steady as steel. "You're saying you can fly that hog?" he demanded, gesturing toward the tarmac. Her answer was simple: yes. The room rippled with disbelief. A few laughed bitterly, others cursed. The leader didn't laugh. He studied her, weighing the calm in her voice against the chaos outside. The SEALs thought she was a mechanic reaching above her station. What they didn't know was that she had once flown sorties the world would never hear about. The woman stepped forward into the lantern light. The name tag on her uniform read Cross. She didn't give explanations. She didn't try to prove herself. She simply repeated, "I can fly it." The captain's jaw tightened. "You realize what's at stake? That hog isn't just for escape. If it doesn't fly tonight, none of us walk away." She said, "I know." Her tone carried no hesitation. The men exchanged looks, torn between disbelief and a spark of desperate hope. The captain finally exhaled. "All right, Cross, if you're lying, you bury us all." She gave a small nod. "Then I won't lie." Outside, the engines of enemy armor grew louder, their headlights piercing the desert night. The SEALs braced for the final wave, while inside the hangar, one woman stepped toward the A-10, the only thing standing between survival and annihilation. The hangar doors groaned as a pair of SEALs shoved them open, letting the night spill in. Wind carried smoke and dust across the strip, and through the haze, the A-10 waited, scarred, paint blistered, its shark mouth grinning, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Cross walked steadily toward it. She didn't rush, didn't falter. The SEALs trailed behind, some shaking their heads, others muttering that this was madness. "Sir, she's maintenance crew. She's not a pilot." one hissed to the captain. Then watch her, the captain snapped. And they did. Cross circled the Warthog with the quiet focus of someone checking an old friend for wounds. Her hand brushed the fuselage, fingers pausing on seams and rivets, eyes narrowing on the pitted scars across the wing. She crouched, scanned the landing gear, then rose fluidly, every motion crisp and efficient. The captain frowned. He had seen real pilots do this exact dance before a sortie. This wasn't someone playing pretend. This was ritual. She climbed onto the wing, boots slipping slightly on the wet metal, but correcting without hesitation. The canopy creaked open beneath her grip. She glanced down at the SEALs staring up. "You'll need to hold them off long enough for me to get airborne," she said flatly. A younger operator laughed bitterly. "Lady, you'll get 10 feet down the strip before you stall that hog into the sand." Cross didn't look at him. "Then you'd better pray I don't." She slid into the cockpit. Inside, the world shifted. The storm outside became muffled, reduced to the hiss of rain against the canopy. Her hands hovered over the controls, familiar, remembered. She touched each switch like greeting an old language. Battery, fuel, oxygen, auxiliary power. The Warthog trembled as the systems flickered alive. Lights glowed across the console. Gauges shifted. A hum grew, low and steady. Through the glass, the SEALs stared. Doubt cracked. One muttered, "She knows the sequence." The first engine coughed violently, belching smoke before dying down. Cross adjusted the throttle, tried again. This time the turbine spun with a roar, blades cutting the storm. The ground trembled beneath the SEAL's boots. The second engine was worse, choking with a metallic rattle. She coaxed it, fingers working the sequence with patient precision. Sweat beaded at her temple as alarms shrieked. Then, with a thunderous roar, the second engine caught. Both turbines now screaming against the desert wind, the shark mouth snarling to life. The SEALs had mocked her. Now they stared in silence, watching a so-called mechanic breathe life into a beast only pilots dared to tame. The captain climbed the ladder 2 steps, leaning toward the canopy. Rain and dust streaked across his helmet. His voice was sharp, but edged with something else now. Hope. "Who are you, Cross?" Her eyes flicked up at him, calm, unshaken. For a heartbeat, he thought she might tell him. Instead, she said only, "Get your men ready. I won't have time for introductions." He clenched his jaw, then dropped back to the ground. Turning to his team, he barked, "Perimeter! Hold the line until she's airborne." Gunfire cracked outside the base, closer now, the night lit with tracer fire, streaks of red carving the night sky. A scout stumbled into the hangar, panting. "Armored convoy, less than 3 clicks out. Heavy vehicles, multiple platoons. They'll be at the fence in minutes." The captain's face hardened. He raised his rifle. "You heard him. Hold until the hog flies." The SEALs surged to position, rifles ready. The hangar shuddered as mortars struck nearby, dust raining from steel beams. Inside the cockpit, Cross pulled her harness tight. The Warthog's engines thundered, rattling the glass, vibrating through her bones. She whispered under her breath, not to the men, not even to herself, to the machine. "Not tonight. You've still got fight left in you." Outside, the growl of enemy armor grew louder, headlights cutting through the desert dark. Inside, the Warthog roared, straining against the brakes. In moments, Elena Cross would either rise into the sky or die with the SEALs on the ground. The night shook with violence. Mortars hammered the outer fence, spraying dirt and shrapnel across the base. SEALs hugged cover, rifles snapping bursts into the dark as silhouettes advanced through the dust. Headlights cut through the storm, armored vehicles grinding forward, their engines a low, relentless growl. Inside the cockpit, Elena Cross sat still. Her body was calm, her heartbeat steady, but her eyes scanned the instruments with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The Warthog was battered, its systems groaning, but alive. And alive was enough.
The SEALs dove aside as the beast roared down the runway. Gunfire chased it, sparks ricocheting from the ground around its wheels. Enemy rounds hammered the strip, but the Warthog surged forward, every vibration rattling Cross's bones. The end of the runway loomed too fast. The engine screamed. She pulled. For a heartbeat, the jet resisted, heavy with scars and weight. Then the nose lifted, wings biting air. The ground dropped away. The SEALs below erupted in a cheer, drowned by turbine thunder. Against all odds, she was airborne. What they didn't know was that takeoff had been the easy part. Cross climbed into the storm, lightning flashing across the canopy. Her eyes flicked to the horizon. Headlights, dozens of them, crawling like a swarm across the desert floor. Armored vehicles, troop carriers, technicals bristling with weapons, all converging on the base. She steadied the stick. Her thumb hovered over the weapons control. The Warthog had been designed for this exact moment. Tank killer, convoy breaker. She rolled into a dive. The desert rushed upward, headlights glowing brighter. SEALs on the perimeter saw the silhouette streak overhead, its shark mouth snarling through the clouds. The first salvo ripped from the wings. Rockets streaked down, slamming into the convoy. Explosions tore across the desert, fireballs swallowing vehicles. The ground shook under the blast. Cheers rose from the base, the SEALs emboldened. They pushed from cover, cutting down enemy infantry scrambling in panic. The captain's voice cracked over comms. "She hit them. Cross, you just broke their line." Cross pulled up, the jet shuddering under the strain. Her grip tightened, muscles straining against the resistance of a damaged frame. Warnings blinked angrily across the console, hydraulics stressed, engine temperatures spiking. She ignored them. She banked again, lining up a second run. The A-10 screamed low across the desert, cannons rumbling. The iconic GAU-8 Avenger thundered to life, spitting a storm of depleted uranium shells. The sound was like ripping metal, a sound no soldier forgot once they heard it. Shells tore through armor, ripping vehicles open like paper. Fire and smoke climbed high, silhouettes scattering in terror. The desert became chaos, lit by flame and tracer fire. On the ground, SEALs who had braced for death now fought with renewed fury. A young operator shouted, "She's tearing them apart!" The captain exhaled, eyes never leaving the sky. He had gambled everything on this woman, and she was delivering like a ghost from another war. But the fight was far from over. As the smoke cleared, Cross's radar lit with new signatures, larger, heavier. A fresh wave of armored reinforcements crawled out of the dark, bringing with them something bigger, a mobile SAM system, its radar already searching for her. Cross's jaw clenched. The A-10 was a tank killer, not built for duels with missiles, and this one was already searching for her. Below, the SEALs thought the tide had turned. Above, Cross knew the truth. One missile lock, and the Hog would fall from the sky before she could save them again. The desert lit with fire. Charred wrecks smoldered across the dunes where her last strike had hit, the burning shells of enemy vehicles painting the night orange. For a fleeting moment, the SEALs thought they were winning. But Cross's console told another story. A shrill tone pierced the cockpit. The radar warning receiver, a mobile SAM system, had locked onto her. Her eyes flicked to the scope. The unit wasn't small,
A tracked vehicle rolled out from behind a ridge, its radar dish rotating hungrily, searching for her heat signature. Soldiers clustered around it, feeding its system. The worst possible opponent for a hog. "Cross, talk to me," the captain barked over comms. "New threat. Surface to air. I'll handle it," she said calmly, though her hands tightened on the controls. On the ground, the SEALs weren't calm. The gunfire hadn't stopped. Waves of infantry pushed through the smoke, rifles flashing, RPGs streaking toward the base perimeter. One detonated against the outer wall, throwing 2 men backward. The captain grabbed them by their vests, dragging them back behind cover as another explosion rattled the ground. "Hold your line," he shouted. "She needs time." Cross dropped altitude, hugging the desert floor. Tracers whipped past her canopy. She could almost feel the heat of them, could almost hear the hiss of rounds chewing through empty air. The Warthog's armor could take punishment, but not a missile strike. She wasn't just fighting the enemy. She was fighting the very limits of the aircraft beneath her. Her thumb pressed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger roared again, a brutal growl that drowned even the thunder of battle. 7 barrels spun, spewing shells the size of milk bottles at 3,900 rounds per minute. The sound was so deep it seemed to shake the earth itself. Enemy vehicles split apart under the barrage, molten metal spraying across the sand. Infantry scattered, some diving for cover, others swallowed by explosions. The ground burned in ribbons of destruction. The SEALs raised their heads from cover, eyes wide. One shouted above the chaos, "That's not a mechanic flying, she's a ghost!" The captain didn't argue. He was too busy watching her carve open the desert with surgical brutality. Whoever Elena Cross really was, she had turned their hopeless night into a storm the enemy couldn't control. Inside the cockpit, sweat beaded her brow. The stick felt heavy, sluggish. Hydraulics groaned. Warning lights blinked red. Every maneuver demanded more strength, more focus. But her voice over comms stayed level. Convoy cut to half strength, still closing. "Cross, pull back. We can't lose you to that SAM." She ignored him. She banked low, lining up another run. The radar warning tone grew louder, urgent, a shriek of imminent luck. Her teeth clenched. She dove straight toward the convoy, daring the SAM operator to fire. The SEALs fired from the perimeter, cutting down advancing infantry. But for every squad they dropped, another surged forward. One SEAL was hit, crumpling into the sand. Another dragged him behind cover, shouting for a medic who wasn't there. Their ammo was running low. The captain slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, breath ragged. He glanced at the sky, muttering under his breath, "Come on, Cross, we need you now." Above, the A-10 thundered past, her cannons tearing another armored truck apart. Explosions rolled across the desert like shock waves. The SAM's radar tracked her relentlessly, its system hungry. Cross banked hard left, hugging the terrain, but the tone in her headset changed. Solid, piercing, missile lock. She had seconds, maybe less, and every man on the ground was counting on her to survive. She yanked the stick, forcing the hog into a climb. G-forces pressed her into the seat, her vision darkening at the edges. The Warthog groaned in protest, but followed her command. Then the night split open. A plume of fire erupted from the ridge as the missile left its launcher, a burning spear slicing into the storm, hungry for her heat signature. The SEALs saw it streak upward, their voices caught in their throats. "Missile launch!" the captain shouted into his radio, though there was nothing anyone on the ground could do. The A-10 roared across the desert sky, its pilot fighting a machine barely holding together. And now a missile screamed toward her, seconds away from deciding whether the last hope of the SEALs lived or died. The missile tore into the night, a screaming spear of fire. Every SEAL on the perimeter felt their stomachs drop as it closed the distance toward the Warthog. Inside the cockpit, alarms shrieked in Raven's ears, the missile lock warning shrill and steady. Cross gritted her teeth, forcing the stick hard right. The A-10 groaned under the maneuver, hydraulics lagging, panels rattling as the beast resisted. The missile curved after her, its guidance system relentless. Her breathing slowed. Years of muscle memory guided her hands. She shoved the throttle forward, slammed flares into release. Bright bursts of fire streaked downward, decoys burning hot against the night. For a split second, the missile wavered. Then it corrected, bypassing the flares. "Cross, it's still tracking," the captain's voice barked in her ear. "I see it," she muttered. The desert spun beneath her as she dove low, hugging the ground. The missile closed, less than 3 seconds behind. She yanked the stick again, muscles screaming from the G-force, her vision tunneling into gray. At the last instant, she rolled. The missile shot past, too fast to turn, and detonated against the ridge. A ball of fire erupted, the shockwave rattling the Warthog so violently she nearly lost control. The SEALs erupted in cheers, voices echoing across the base. But Cross didn't celebrate. She steadied the jet, scanning her instruments. Hydraulic pressure critical, right aileron stiff. Another hit like that, and the hog would never fly again. She had beaten one missile, but the radar sweep on her scope told her the SAM was already readying another. On the ground, the fight was worse. Enemy infantry swarmed from multiple directions, rifles blazing. SEALs crouched behind broken concrete, firing controlled bursts, but the weight of numbers pressed harder with each wave. An RPG slammed into the perimeter wall, sending a spray of debris that knocked one operator unconscious. "Man down," another yelled, dragging him back. Blood streaked across the sand. The captain fired until his magazine clicked empty, then slammed another home. His throat burned from shouting, his shoulders aching from recoil. He glanced skyward, muttering, "Come on, Cross, we're out of time." Above, Cross banked again, lining up the convoy. Her thumb pressed the trigger, and the GAU-8 roared to life. The 7-barrel Avenger spat fire and metal, ripping through armored vehicles like paper. The sound shook the desert, a grinding roar that drowned even the storm. Shells tore through troop carriers, detonating ammo stores, sending soldiers scrambling. Flames climbed into the night, black smoke twisting into the clouds. The SEALs pushed forward, emboldened. One sprinted across open ground, sliding into cover beside a burning wreck, cutting down 2 enemies in quick succession. Another hurled a grenade, the explosion tossing silhouettes into the air. Still, the fight didn't relent. A squad of enemy marksmen took position on a dune, their rifles flashing. Bullets cracked around the SEALs, forcing them lower. A machine gun nest lit up from the east, pinning them in place. Cross saw it all. She angled the Warthog, lined up the nest. The cannon thundered again, shells chewing through sandbags, men and gun alike. The dune erupted, bodies scattering, the threat erased in seconds. "Direct hit!" a SEAL shouted, voice ragged with relief. Cross pulled up, her arms trembling from the effort. Every movement took more from her, every second in the air draining both machine and pilot. Warning lights screamed at her, but she kept flying. The SEALs thought she was their savior. What they didn't know was that the aircraft beneath her was already falling apart. The SAM's radar locked again. Another missile launch plume lit the horizon. Cross hissed through her teeth, shoving the throttle. Flares burst once more, painting the sky with burning trails. The missile twisted between them, hunting. She dove, pulled hard left, the hog.
This time, the missile clipped closer, too close. It detonated prematurely, the blast waves slamming into the jet. The cockpit shook violently, alarms shrieking louder. Smoke trailed from her right wing. The captain's voice cracked in her headset. "Cross, report." "I'm still here," her voice strained but steady.
The SEALs on the ground saw the damage, the smoke curling behind her, yet she still circled, lining up another run. Below, armored reinforcements pushed closer. Heavy vehicles ground across the sand, infantry advancing behind their steel shadows. If they reached the base, the SEALs would be overrun. Cross steadied her hands, ignoring the screaming protests of the hog. Her thumb pressed the trigger again. The GAU-8 spat a storm of shells, tearing through the lead tank. The explosion lit the desert, a fireball rolling across the dunes. The SEALs roared, pushing back with everything they had. Gunfire lit the night, tracer rounds chasing fleeing silhouettes. But even as the enemy line faltered, new shapes emerged on the horizon. Trucks, more armor, more men. The desert seemed endless, wave after wave of steel and fire rolling toward them. Cross's vision blurred from exhaustion, her arms heavy on the stick. The jet trembled, every warning light glowing red. She forced it to climb, to line up again. She couldn't stop. Not yet. Below, the SEALs thought they might survive the night. Above, Cross saw the truth. The enemy was sending everything, and her hog had only minutes left before it gave out. The final test was still to come. The desert was fire and smoke. Headlights crawled from the horizon. The forward base shook under a last push. If this wave broke through, nothing stood behind it. "Ammo count," the SEAL captain yelled. "Black on grenades, last mags," came back through grit and gunfire. A truck-mounted gun raked the fence, sparks geysered from steel. He ducked when the hog returned. Elena Cross rolled over trailing smoke. In the cockpit, scorched insulation, hot aluminum, a hydraulic beat with a skipped step. Both hands stayed on the stick. On her scope, APCs, technicals, and farther out a square-shouldered silhouette, Sam, dish rotating, waiting. "Base actual," she radioed. "On cold sky. Keep every muzzle down for 5. The captain passed it along. The dish found her. Cross descended until heat haze made the ground look liquid. She popped a sting of flares, bait, and nosed toward a decoy to sweeten the line. The tone sharpened, the missile leapt. "Cold sky," she said. The berms flattened. She dumped the real flare train, kicked a roll and dragged the seeker into a rising furnace, a ruptured fuel fire beyond the fence. The warhead committed, vanished into the plume, and blossomed into a shock wave that slapped the Warthog sideways.
Harness webbing bit her shoulders. She leveled low and brought the ridge into the pipper, not the Sam's face, but the thin wrist where dish met yoke. She squeezed. The GAU-8 rewrote the air. The mount jackknifed, the dish folded, the crew went to ground. With the Sky Hunter broken, the night briefly belonged to the hog, but only while she could keep the beast stitched together. Relief lasted one breath. An armored bulldozer shoved the wire. APCs growled behind. A water tower flashed with snipers. The heavy gun returned to sawing the fence. "East gun, dune snipers, dozer on the wire," 3 voices shouted. "Cross, black out that MG," the captain ordered. She flew like a crop duster, belly near sand. Tracers stitched toward her. She tapped the trigger, 3/4 of a second. The nest detonated. She knifed left, walked shells through the tower's legs. The flashes died. The bulldozer kept coming, men hunched in its wake. She ignored the blade and wrote the GAU-8 across the hinge until the jaw sagged. The push became a stumble. The men scattered. Counters showed rockets enough for 1 line. She saw the convoys spying, 3 APCs, nose to tail, a fuel truck behind. She thumbed and let them go. 3 needles, 3 whumps. The dunes folded into fire. "Base, push now while they're blind." The SEALs flowed, dragging a wounded man, knifing a silhouette. vaulting a barrier and taking 2 shots that settled a question. Lanes became theirs by motion and nerve. Cross-checked instruments, drum nearly empty, hydraulics surviving out of spite, the starboard engine coughing. One righteous run remained. She set up long and stitched a last sentence across what still shot back. An APC angling clever, 2 technicals hunting a flank, a knot of infantry braced behind a toppled container, an officer screaming himself into leadership. Metal opened, momentum died. The open man's surrender arrived too late. Silence arrived, in pieces, then held. The heavy gun was gone, the tower a dark lattice. The dozer leaned with a broken jaw. Fire licked at what remained. "Status," Cross said. The captain stood, called names, got most back. 2 did not, and hands landed on shoulders instead. He looked up at the smoking silhouette. "You're clear," he said, "and we're here." The hog coughed, lost, found. The right engine quit. The left tried to carry weight and nearly dropped it. The runway was a scar. Nose gear showed no green. "Foam the first third," she said. "I'm sliding on my chin." "2 trucks," someone answered.
They painted white on black. Cross brought the Warthog around in a pattern that barely earned the name. The left engine gave 1 shove onto final and quit. She crossed the fence in a hush, dropped the mains as soft as steel allows, and held the nose until gravity had its say. The chin met foam and sparks, panels folded, the hog slid straight, veered left, then straight again when she bullied dead controls into one last obedience. It stopped with a weary sigh. She killed what was left and let her body shake. People ran, SEALs, mechanics with extinguishers, a medic with a bag. The canopy stuck, then yielded. Night air tasted like hot paint and saved lives. She waved off hands and climbed down. The captain met her under the shark mouth's chipped grin. "Who are you?" he asked. Not a challenge, a need. She looked at the foam-frosted nose and the quiet ridge. "Tell your crew chief the hog wants a new right pump, a nose strut, a full control check, and the starboard root panels lying about being attached." A faint twitch. "And tell him she can fight again." That's not an answer. It's the one you need tonight. A mechanic hovered, eyes bright. "Ma'am, did you really take the dish with the gun?" "Missed the face, hit the neck," she said. He grinned and patted the fuselage. "She's a mean girl." The captain touched Cross's sleeve. "If I put something in the report, what do I write?" "Write that when you asked the room, someone stood." "If they push for a name, write Cross. If they push harder, write doesn't matter." He nodded. Night settled. Medics went to work. "You're bleeding," the medic said. "I'm aerodynamic," Cross deadpanned. She walked to the edge of the floodlight and let the desert take her shadow. Behind, the SEALs counted the living and named the lost. The captain watched the dark where she'd gone. Then his men. "Hydrate, check your buddy, then we start the long part." Someone called, "Sir, what do we call her?" He considered the broken dish, the kneeling dozer, and the line she'd written across a night that had wanted them dead. "Call her what you like," he said. "I'll call her the